I've been interested in, I think I knew I wanted to be an artist all my life. I lived in France one summer with a family and spent a lot of time at the Jeu de Paume looking at Impressionists, and I'm going to show you sort of throughout the presentation different artists or pieces that had sort of major impact in my life. And for whatever reason, this Degas sculpture really just has stuck with me throughout my life. I bought a poster of it, I had it in my room at college, I refer to it a lot. And this was the first piece that I made. What's interesting about this piece to me is that it's a piece that can't be used, actually, because it's a raku piece. It doesn't really hold water. For me, from the beginning, function didn't really play a big part of my story. I'm really interested in the form, although I have a tremendous appreciation for function and the beauty of function, but for me, that wasn't the main thing. I tend to have these very intense experiences with art. Like, I'll spend like days, you know, in one space looking at, like, I went to the Rothko Chapel in Texas. I can't even tell you how long I was in there. And, you know, it's not that big. I mean, it's smaller than this room. So I ended up developing a production line that I sold wholesale, you know, with the plates and bowls and cups. And I was sort of working with these glazes that are pretty standard glazes that fire in an electric kiln that, you know, has a computer, and it's very regular, and you can produce kind of the same thing over and over. But that didn't interest me so much. I was sort of more interested in some more organic kinds of things happening. So I was trying to combine glazes to react together in that kiln. This is this crappuccino that's formulated to actually craze, to crack like that. You know, I often look at these pieces kind of as paintings, and I just see this as kind of a canvas here. So again, you know, I'm not quite as interested. I mean, I love the forms, and I also just am really interested in surface. So then I started playing, as my work developed. I had a few years, like between 2001 and like 2004 or 2005, where I wasn't working, and then I got back to work again, and I started playing the boxes. So this one also, you can see, is lidded, and then I thought, getting back to where I was in college, sometimes you have to go really far to get back to where you were. Why don't I just make this pure sort of sculptural piece? So that's been kind of the progress of the work, I think, by and large, where I start out in a more functional mode, and then sort of, for me, taking it another step further, this piece is here. This box that's wrapped so you wouldn't actually open it, but it's more about the sculpture of it. This is a fully glazed piece, but I had a wax resist on here, and I probably had a latex resist, removed the resist, added another layer. So this is kind of a thinner layer of glaze here. And then this, I had something preventing air from getting to it. And so the salts and sodas migrate away from this area. The whole thing, you'll see in the process section, the whole thing was white when I first glazed it. The glaze is white. With this box form, and thinking, well, why did it necessarily have to be, oops, sorry, wait, sorry, a square, but I could make other shapes. I was raising 2 children by myself. I was building a house. I had restaurants, the school, and I was like, there was a lot going on. And this is a very meditative process that allows you to really think about what you're doing. It's very quieting, and it clearly was something that I needed. I've mostly either now been coiling or working with slabs. The ovals are slabs, which are just these sheets of clay, and this is a coiling process. It's a very old process by which, I'll show you later, you wedge the coils together, so you don't actually see the coils themselves. This is my studio here. And this, I actually have 2 kilns. This is a tiny kiln that I'm not really using anymore. I had a lot of problems with it, with my very high-tech rain protection. That's the addition of a coil, and I just keep going around, and then I work them all in together. I often work with a mirror, so I can see both sides at the same time. And also it gives me more distance. If you're this close to the piece, it's really hard to see things like the angle which you're working and certain ins and outs of the piece. So I mean, I do move back and forth, but this gives me some distance. Work in series. I work on 3 pieces at a time because when they get too wet, you can't keep working on them because they can't hold their own weight. So I let them set up and I start working on the next piece. So these pieces are in various states of wet and dry. This is a fully dry, it's partially dry, these are just finished. So this is my electric kiln, where once the pieces are dry, they go in here to get bisqued, which basically means just all the water is extracted. They become more durable, and they readily accept glaze. These are the pieces after they've been bisqued. They're this hideous color pink. They're truly horrible. So these are a group of pieces waiting to be glazed. They've been bisqued, and sort of I would study them and decide what I was going to do to them or with them. These are my buckets of glaze. I mix the glazes myself from various raw materials that consist of clays and salts and feldspars. And once I have everything ready, this is my kiln. It used to be this tall, but it was too big, so we lowered the arch so I could fill it a little more easily. This whole thing rolls out of the kiln, so I don't have to lean in and put the pieces in. Makes it a lot easier to load it. It's a gas-fired kiln. It has no permanent shelves. You build the shelves to fit the pieces. This is the back of the kiln. There's 2 burner ports. My pyrometer, which after 2,000 degrees, the pyrometer freaks out. It doesn't really know what's happening except that it's getting hotter. So I have other ways of judging the temperature. But these are the cones that tell me what temperature I'm at in the kiln. This is us checking the kiln for the temperature. This is a spy hole. There's no mortar in the kiln because the kiln expands and contracts, so the mortar would crack. So it's laid brick upon brick, and the arch too. There's no mortar in the arch, and it's held together with these iron straps. This is the spy hole. You pull the brick out. It's really hot. I'm always looking at the color of the flame, the sound of the flame, because it's a better indicator of what temperature and how you're doing than, because you start at like a dull red, and by the time you get to the top of the kiln at 2400, it's white heat. And so along the way, if you're at like bright orange, you're at a particular. I had a really, really horrible firing. Like horrible. I knew I had misfired the kiln. There were all kinds of issues that I couldn't even possibly go into. But I have to wait 3 days to open the kiln. So I finally opened the kiln, and I've lost like 50 pieces. And it was the summer before I was having this major show in East Hampton. And so I took like a half an hour. I sat down in front of the kiln, and I was like, okay, that's it. I gotta move on. I got rid of everything that was cracked. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna reglaze everything that is trashed. They were all blistered, like really, it was way worse than white shit. It was like just like dangerous, bad, horrible. So I took a Dremel tool, which is like a drilling, grinding thing, and I started grinding off all the blisters on this piece. I'm grinding, a tiny little tool, and then I was gonna heat it up and dip it in more glaze. And I stepped back from it, I was like, well, why would I do that? This is like really cool. So it set me off on this whole other path of grinding the glaze off. So this is, again, carbon trapping. The carbon has gotten into the body of the clay. This is the glaze, the remaining glaze that had fused to the piece. But I started using the angle grinder as kind of a paintbrush.